Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really foundational piece of cybersecurity. We're going to be looking directly at the CompTIA Security Plus certification material to explore exactly how to deploy appropriate cryptographic solutions. Securing a system requires a really firm grasp on the different levels of encryption available to us, and I am super excited to unpack this together and see how all these different layers fit together. Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to ask yourself a question right off the bat. Where is your most sensitive data right now? Just picture it for a second. Is it sitting on a physical hard drive on your desk? Is it floating somewhere out there in cloud storage? Or is it actively moving across a network as you hit send on an email? Because before we even talk about protecting information, we have to recognize that our data lives and breathes in completely different digital and physical spaces. So here's our structural roadmap for today. We'll start with the 3 data states, then move into macro protection, covering disks and volumes. From there, we'll look at partitioning your defenses, zoom way in for micro defense on databases and files, and wrap up with securing data in transit. Now, obviously, our baseline here is encryption. It's the process of converting information into a coded format that is just completely unreadable by unauthorized users. In information security, this is your critical, overarching shield against unauthorized data access. But the main thing to realize here is that we can't just slap a single type of encryption on a network and call it a day. There are entirely different kinds and levels of encryption specifically designed to meet varying security needs all across an architecture. All right, let's jump into Section 1, the 3 data states, or as I like to think of it, knowing your battlefield. Before we can go picking out our armor, we really have to understand the battlefield itself. Data actually exists in 3 very distinct environments. First, we have data at rest. This is your inactive or archived data, think backups or files just sitting untouched in a cloud storage bucket. Then we have data in transit, which is sometimes called data in motion. This is data actively crossing a network from point A to point B, or even residing temporarily right there in computer memory. And finally, there's data in use, or data in processing. This is data actively undergoing change, like a database you're querying or a spreadsheet being actively updated. Understanding the very unique vulnerabilities of each of these 3 states is the absolute foundation of a robust defense strategy. Moving right along to Section 2, macro protection, focusing on disks and volumes. Let's start our spatial narrative by zooming in from the very top. This is the largest scope at which we can transform data into a secure format. Imagine a giant, impenetrable fortress wall wrapping around your entire digital life. That is full disk encryption. By applying encryption to the entire hard drive, we're basically placing a massive exterior guard on the internal contents of the device, and this gives us fantastic blanket protection. Because it covers literally everything, it requires 0 effort from the user to protect individual files. It mitigates the risk of exposure if a device gets stolen, and crucially, it secures the data remnants we so often forget about: temporary files, browser cache, application-specific backups, all of it automatically encrypted by default. But what happens when that fortress wall needs to protect an entire complex of buildings instead of just a single one? Well, that's where volume encryption comes into play. In enterprise environments, your data is often just too massive for one physical drive. A volume is a single accessible storage area that might actually span multiple physical drives. Volume encryption secures that entire accessible area as one single unit. This lets you maintain the confidentiality of massive amounts of data all at once, completely agnostic of how that data happens to be physically spread across different pieces of hardware in a server rack. Okay, on to Section 3, partitioning your defenses, where we look at independent protection. So, we've seen the giant exterior walls. Now let's step one layer deeper into the fortress. We're moving from protecting the entire massive building to securing specific, separate rooms inside it. As we know, a partition treats a portion of a disk as a completely separate unit. But from a cryptographic standpoint, the real value here is intentional compartmentalization. Users can encrypt specific partitions completely independently from the rest of the operating system. And that allows for highly targeted security protocols on shared physical drives. And this brilliantly illustrates why an architect might choose one strategy over another, or maybe even blend both. Full disk encryption gives you that totally 0 effort blanket protection for absolutely everything on the drive. But partition encryption, that gives you precise compartmentalization. If you need to store highly sensitive information on the exact same physical disk alongside much less sensitive, frequently accessed data, partition encryption is absolutely your answer. You can lock down those highly sensitive rooms without having to put the exact same overly restrictive lock on the front door of the entire building. Let's keep zooming in. Section 4, Micro Defense, focusing on databases and files. We've gone from the building to the rooms, and now we are literally looking at the safes and filing cabinets inside those rooms. This is where file-level encryption comes in. Instead of encrypting an entire drive or partition, you apply encryption directly to specific files. This adds an incredible level of granularity, which is absolutely vital in shared corporate computing environments. Think about it. When tons of people have legitimate access to the same general system or partition, file-level encryption ensures that only the specifically authorized individuals hold the keys to open highly sensitive documents. Now, when we talk about octavely processing data, databases are the true crown jewels of an organization. Securing them isn't just about encrypting the stored data. It requires a cohesive, holistic story of defense. First, you have to separate the database from your web servers, so a front-end breach doesn't immediately compromise your backend. You defend it digitally with a web application firewall, or WAF, and crucially, you cannot forget the physical reality. Tightly guard your secrets and literally make sure your servers are sitting in locked, hardened cabinets. Combine all that with strict audit procedures and active monitoring, and you create a defense in depth that actually protects the data when it's at rest and when it's actively in use. If file and database encryption are the safes and filing cabinets, record-level encryption is locking up a single, specific sheet of paper inside a manila folder. Record-level encryption secures individual units of data, like literally one single row in a massive database. We have finally reached the absolute micro level of our Zoom-in journey. This safeguards the integrity and confidentiality of specific, targeted entries within a massive dataset. It ensures that even if the database is queried, the most critical individual lines remain locked away securely. Finally, Section 5, Securing Data in Transit, which covers transport and communication. So we've completely locked down the fortress at every possible spatial level, while the data is just sitting there. But what happens when that data actually needs to travel? I want you to think of this as your sensitive data leaving the secure building in an armored car. Transport or communication encryption is that armored car. It's the security measures applied as data moves from its origin to its final destination. You see, when data leaves your heavily encrypted drive and travels out onto the open internet, it becomes incredibly vulnerable to interception. Applying encryption here is absolutely critical to safeguard this in-motion data from unauthorized access while it's out there in the wild. We have zoomed all the way from the massive scale of full-disk encryption down to securing a single spreadsheet row, and finally to protecting that data as it flies across the globe in transit. So what does this all mean? Well, I'll leave you with this provocative question to think about. Look at your own data footprint right now. Is your data actually protected at every single level? Understanding these cryptographic solutions is your absolute first step to ensuring the answer to that is a confident yes. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep your data secure.